Meow, meow. Oh, my delightful darlings, you crave more whispers of forgotten history, more tales of royal eccentricities, more chonky insights from your favorite golden chonk? You want to sink deeper into the astonishingly bizarre life of a king who, shall we say, wasn't quite what the history books purr about? Excellent. Snuggle in, stretch out, and prepare yourselves, because tonight we shall truly unravel the colossal, captivating, and quite frankly, quite gross truth about King Henry VIII. This isn't just a story. It's an epic journey into the grotesque, the paranoid, and the truly unbelievable. Now imagine with me, if you will, a king so profoundly rotund that he needed special mechanical contraptions just to shuffle from one opulent chamber to another. Picture a monarch whose very presence was heralded not by trumpets, but by a scent so unfortunate that his most loyal servants would quite literally bolt away, clapping hands over their mouths, utterly gagging. And oh, the grand finale. His final departure from this mortal coil was so utterly, spectacularly dramatic that his very coffin, reinforced and sealed, exploded from the sheer volume of, well, gases from his decomposing regal self. You see, even in death, Henry VIII was an absolute monarch of mayhem, a true master of posthumous chaos. Let us begin with the most astounding, the most jaw-dropping, the most utterly flabbergasting truth about this infamous king. A truth that will, quite frankly, make Game of Thrones look like a fluffy children's fairy tale. By the twilight of his tumultuous life, Henry VIII was, to put it mildly, not just a man, but a walking, breathing, and quite possibly wheezing, rattling catastrophe. We're talking about a human being whose physique had become so extraordinary, so incredibly ample, that his own loyal staff, hardened to the many unsavory realities of court life, were left utterly traumatized by the mere sight and smell of him. Can you even begin to fathom, my dear listeners, a waistline of a staggering 54 inches? To put that into perspective, my furry friends, that's wider than many people are tall. And his weight? A truly astonishing 400 pounds. In an era where the average English gentleman, a robust fellow perhaps, might have tipped the scales at a mere 140 pounds, Henry was truly in a league of his own, a veritable colossus among men. But here's where the narrative truly spirals into the realm of the utterly grotesque, the genuinely unsettling. It wasn't just his prodigious, almost unbelievable size. Oh no. His legs, oh, his poor, tormented legs, were perpetually marred by festering open wounds that simply, stubbornly refused to mend. These weren't dainty little nicks or minor abrasions, mind you. No, these were colossal ulcers, deep and wide, that oozed pus and decaying, rotted flesh without cease. The very air around him, within his royal chambers, was so profoundly saturated with this overwhelming, sickening odor that courtiers, noblemen, and ladies alike would instinctively press heavily perfumed handkerchiefs to their faces, trying desperately to create a meager barrier against the assault as they dared approach their king. Whispers and detailed descriptions from historical accounts suggest that this truly dreadful stench was detectable not just in the immediate vicinity, but from several rooms away. Imagine, even the most dedicated servants, those whose very livelihoods depended on their unwavering loyalty, would actually draw straws, a grim and silent lottery, to determine who would face the unenviable, the truly dreadful task of helping him dress. For proximity to those weeping, putrefying wounds was deemed a truly dreadful, almost unendurable form of punishment. But wait, my little night owls, there's a deeper medical mystery, a hidden illness that unravels even more of Henry's bizarre and terrifying decline. Experts in modern medicine, with the benefit of hindsight and advanced understanding, propose that Henry likely suffered a severe traumatic brain injury following a catastrophic jousting accident back in the fateful year of 1536. This wasn't just a minor bump on the head, a slight concussion. He was rendered utterly unconscious for a full 2 hours. And in medieval terms, my dear listeners, being unconscious for that long was practically a brush with the Grim Reaper himself, a miracle to have even survived. This devastating injury, my fluffy friends, is widely believed to have triggered profound and horrifying personality shifts, fundamentally transforming him from a relatively well-adjusted, charming young monarch into the wrathful, paranoid, and utterly tyrannical monster of his later, infamous years. And here's a juicy tidbit your typical history teacher probably conveniently skipped, or perhaps never even knew. Henry also likely grappled with a condition called Cushing's syndrome, a glandular disorder that perfectly explains his explosive and uncontrollable weight gain, his extreme and volatile mood swings, and those stubbornly unhealing, horrific leg ulcers that plagued him until his very last breath. His own physicians, bless their terrified, trembling hearts, wouldn't dare suggest such a dire or critical diagnosis to their temperamental monarch, for criticizing the king's health, even subtly hinting at an illness, was, quite simply, an act of treason, punishable by agonizing death. The very man who so vehemently asserted his divine right to rule over an entire, sprawling nation, who could command armies and execute nobles with a mere nod, couldn't even control his own bowel movements in his final, miserable years. Royal attendants, with grim determination, had to dutifully cut special, perhaps even cushioned, chairs wherever he lumbered, wherever he was moved, for Henry could barely traverse a single room without an unfortunate, embarrassing, and truly dreadful accident. And this, my dears, was the same king who would casually, mercilessly, execute innocent people for merely glancing at him the wrong way, for a perceived slight, for a whispered comment. Oh, the profound, almost unbearable irony. Now, let's turn our attention with a sympathetic purr to the ladies of the court, for Henry's wives, bless their unfortunate souls, endured torments far, far exceeding mere execution. Everyone, even the most casual student of history, knows he had 6 wives and famously dispatched 2 of them to the executioner's block. But the chilling reality of what these women truly suffered, the sheer psychological agony they endured, makes even the most chilling modern thrillers or the most gruesome serial killer sagas seem like a gentle children's lullaby. Take, for instance, poor, doomed Anne Boleyn. Before her fateful execution, Henry didn't just casually decide to end her life. Oh no, that would have been far too simple, far too merciful for his twisted mind. Instead, he meticulously orchestrated an elaborate, cunning frame-up, a cruel charade that included coercing her own musician, under unimaginable torture, to confess to having an illicit affair with her. But here's the truly twisted, most sickening part, the detail that will make your fur stand on end. Henry, in his boundless cruelty, forced Anne to bear witness as 5 innocent men, including her very own beloved brother, were executed on the fabricated charges of sleeping with her. Imagine the unutterable horror, the profound despair, the sheer terror of standing there, her heart surely pounding like a drum, knowing her own brutal fate was sealed, watching innocent lives extinguished one by her husband's deranged fantasies and paranoid delusions. Catherine Howard, a mere teenager, a vibrant young woman barely past childhood when she was thrust into the terrifying lion's den of Henry's marriage, faced an even more horrific fate. When Henry, in a fit of rage, uncovered her innocent past relationships, he didn't simply execute her. Oh no. He, in a fit of monumental, unimaginable pettiness, actually passed a law making it treason for anyone, any woman, to marry the king without first divulging their entire sexual history. Can you believe it? He altered the entire legal system, a pillar of justice, because his teenage wife, a child herself, wasn't a virgin. But the psychological warfare, my furry friends, the cruel mental games, were arguably the most devastating aspect of his treatment of his wives. Henry would shower his wives with extravagant gifts and fervent affection one day, treating them as queens, only to utterly ignore them, banish them, or unleash terrifying, life-threatening threats the very next. Catherine of Aragon, his first queen, his devoted wife for so many years, spent her final, miserable years essentially under house arrest, cruelly, unbelievably forbidden from even seeing her own beloved daughter, Mary, marry. Meanwhile, Henry, with malicious glee, spread vile rumors that she was mentally ill, deranged. She died alone, whispers of poison trailing her, penning heartfelt, pleading letters to Henry that he, in his callous indifference, never even bothered to read. Prepare yourselves, my devoted listeners, for this next mind-boggling detail, a testament to his utter tyranny. Henry actually forced his wives to sign official documents agreeing to their own divorces or annulments. Anne of Cleves, so utterly terrified of his unpredictable wrath, so desperate to survive, readily agreed to a fabricated sham marriage annulment just to evade the grim certainty of execution. She literally had to pretend their marriage never existed, had to publicly denounce it, and then, in a final act of humiliating submission, thank him for the privilege of not being brutally murdered. And Jane Seymour? The lucky one, as history often paints her, who succumbed to natural causes, dying after giving birth to Henry's longed-for son, Edward? But before her body was even cold, before the earth had truly settled on her grave, Henry was already casting his covetous gaze upon his next potential wife, his next victim. He waited precisely 9 days after her solemn funeral to commence planning his next matrimonial venture, a chilling testament to his profound lack of empathy. This man, my dear ones, treated human beings, living, breathing women, as utterly disposable objects, mere pawns in his grand, terrifying game of power and procreation. And the most heartbreaking, most infuriating part? These women had absolutely no escape. Divorce was unthinkable, an impossibility in their rigid society. Fleeing meant certain death, a traitor's fate. And fighting back, even a whisper of defiance, spelled not only your own swift, agonizing execution, but the potential annihilation, the complete destruction of your entire family, your entire lineage. A truly terrifying, inescapable predicament for these queens. Now, my little connoisseurs of history, let's delve into Henry's utterly insane eating habits. If you think modern competitive eating, with its outlandish challenges and stomach-churning feats, is a spectacle, brace yourselves, truly brace yourselves, for King Henry VIII's daily caloric intake. This man didn't just dine like a king, enjoying the bounty of his realm. He ate as if he were single-handedly attempting to bring about a kingdom-wide famine, a widespread agricultural collapse. Henry consumed approximately 5,000 calories every single day. For context, my sweet listeners, that's more than double, sometimes triple, what a highly active adult male should healthily consume. And remember, by the very end of his life, this very monarch, this gluttonous king, could barely, agonizingly, walk. But the sheer quantity, the mind-boggling volume of food wasn't even the most peculiar or disturbing aspect of his diet. It was what he ate, and perhaps even more bizarrely, how he consumed it. A typical meal, just a single sitting, for Henry included an entire roasted pig, its crackling skin glistening, multiple whole chickens, plump and succulent, several types of exotic fish, fresh from the sea, mountainous piles of freshly baked bread, enough to feed a small army, and enough wine, rich and potent, to float a small boat. His vast, sprawling kitchen staff, a veritable army of culinary artists, prepared over 800 different dishes every single day, solely for his royal household, with Henry personally sampling dozens of them, indulging in every whim. The royal kitchens themselves employed over 200 people, toiling relentlessly, around the clock, day and night, just to keep up with his insatiable, bottomless appetite. But here's where it truly veers into the realm of the utterly bizarre, the fantastically strange. Henry was utterly, unshakably convinced that certain foods possessed mystical, magical, almost supernatural properties. He genuinely believed, with a king's unwavering conviction, that devouring swan, the graceful bird, would somehow imbue him with greater elegance and grace. Consuming vast quantities of deer, the swift and agile creature of the forest he imagined, would miraculously transform him into a superior, more skilled hunter. And as for oysters, oysters, he firmly believed, with a twinkle in his eye perhaps, that they would, shall we say, significantly enhance his performance with his wives, his royal bedroom prowess. So he would gorge himself on these specific chosen foods in colossal, truly massive quantities, almost like a medieval superfood fanatic, obsessed with these culinary elixirs. And then there were his utterly strange, almost ritualistic eating habits. Every single morsel of food destined for Henry's royal mouth was first meticulously tasted by multiple servants, a perilous task designed to detect any hint of poison. But here's the kicker, the truly astonishing twist. His paranoia, his fear of assassination, was so extreme that he demanded his food tasters wait a full 30 minutes after sampling his food, just to ensure they wouldn't suddenly drop dead from some slow-acting poison. Henry's meals were not merely meals, they were veritable theatrical productions, elaborate performances for his court. He would dine in front of hundreds of courtiers, a captive audience, and the entire elaborate process, from appetizer to final sweetmeat, could stretch on for up to 4 grueling hours. Imagine, my dear listeners, sitting there, your stomach rumbling, observing this massive, slowly decaying king, slowly, meticulously consuming enough food to sustain a small village, all while everyone in the room, with poker faces, pretended this was perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable royal decorum. Here's another fascinating, somewhat infuriating historical gem they conveniently neglect to teach you in typical history classes. Henry actually banned certain foods from his court, not because they were unhealthy, not because they might upset his delicate digestive system, but because he deemed them beneath his royal status, too common for his refined palate. Commoners' fare like turnips and humble barley were literally outlawed at his royal table, forbidden to appear, even though they undoubtedly would have been far more beneficial for his rapidly deteriorating health than the mountains of rich meat, sugary confections, and potent wine he devoured daily. The truly bewildering, almost tragic part, even as his body was literally disintegrating, falling apart from the ravages of his diet, Henry continued to eat more and more, convinced in his profound delusion that his divine royal status somehow rendered him magically immune to the natural consequences of his gluttony. A king utterly imprisoned by his own appetites. Now, my little night owls, let's talk about the pervasive, all-consuming paranoia that utterly consumed not just Henry, but an entire empire. Henry VIII's paranoia wasn't just your run-of-the-mill distrust, your typical trust no one attitude. This man transformed his entire kingdom, his very palace, into a surveillance state that would make even the most ruthless modern dictators green with envy. By his final, tormented years, Henry was so utterly convinced that everyone, from the lowliest scullery maid to the highest-ranking duke, was secretly plotting against him, conspiring for his downfall, that he twisted royal life into a living nightmare for every single person in his vicinity. Consider for a moment his sleeping arrangements. Henry, the most powerful man in England, actually slept with loaded crossbows positioned menacingly next to his bed, and he kept multiple sharp daggers tucked securely beneath his pillow. But even that terrifying arsenal, wasn't enough to quell his gnawing anxieties. He had armed guards, vigilant and silent, stationed inside his very own bedroom, watching him sleep throughout the entire night. Imagine the profound terror, the suffocating claustrophobia of being so utterly convinced of imminent assassination that you couldn't even close your eyes, couldn't find a moment's peace without silent, armed witnesses observing your every breath. The very palace itself, this grand and opulent symbol of power, became a veritable fortress of paranoia, a labyrinth of suspicion. Henry ordered the clandestine construction of secret passages throughout every single building he inhabited, every royal residence, not for romantic rendezvous or convenient shortcuts, but solely so he could make a swift, unseen escape if assassins dared to come for him. He even had tiny peepholes, cleverly disguised, installed in walls, allowing him to spy on his own unsuspecting courtiers, observing their every move, their every whispered conversation. And, chillingly, he had hidden listening devices, cunningly concealed, in meeting rooms to eavesdrop on private, supposedly confidential discussions. But here's where it truly descends into absolute madness, my furry friends. Henry, in his boundless delusion, created an entire, sprawling, insidious network of spies whose sole purpose, whose terrifying job, was to spy on his other spies. He had informants watching his informants, creating this twisted, nightmarish web of surveillance and distrust where no one, absolutely no one, knew whom they could truly trust, who was loyal and who was merely playing a dangerous game. Court life, once a vibrant hub of intrigue and power, devolved into a psychological horror show, a constant tightrope walk where uttering the slightest wrong word, a misspoken phrase to the wrong person could, quite literally, lead to your swift, agonizing execution. Henry's food paranoia reached truly ludicrous, almost farcical extremes. Not only did he employ multiple food tasters, as we discussed, each taking a perilous bite, but he demanded that his meals be meticulously prepared in completely sealed kitchens, with armed guards meticulously watching every single step of the cooking process, from the chopping of vegetables to the basting of roasts. The salt, the precious spices, even the water itself had to be tested by different people, different hands, before it was deemed fit for the king's consumption. He was so absolutely convinced that someone, somewhere, would try to poison him, that the simple, fundamental act of eating a meal transformed into a full-blown military operation, a strategic exercise in survival. And the chilling reality is, the man even suspected his own flesh and blood, his beloved children, of secretly plotting against him. He had spies, shadowy figures, observing Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth, his very own daughters, two young women, because he was convinced, in his twisted mind, that they harbored intentions of overthrowing him, of seizing his throne. These were mere children, innocent and powerless in the grand scheme of things, yet he treated them like cunning enemy agents within their own home, their own family. Henry's paranoia became so utterly extreme, so unhinged, that he started executing people for crimes they hadn't even committed yet. He would have someone brutally killed because he simply dreamed they betrayed him, a mere phantom of his subconscious, or because someone else, a manipulative courtier perhaps, merely suggested they might be disloyal in the distant future. The infamous Tower of London, that grim fortress, was perpetually overflowing with innocent people whose only transgression, their only crime, was simply existing, simply breathing, in close proximity to Henry during one of his terrifying, paranoid moods. And the truly terrifying, truly insidious part is that Henry's profound paranoia was so profoundly contagious, so infectious, that it permeated his entire court, infecting everyone around him. Nobles began spying on each other, turning on their closest friends. Servants betrayed their masters for imaginary rewards, for a fleeting moment of favor. And everyone, absolutely everyone, lived in a perpetual, suffocating state of dread, fearing that they would be the next unsuspecting victim of the king's delusional suspicions, his murderous whims. The very air of the court was thick with fear and suspicion, a truly toxic environment created by one man's unraveling mind. And now, for the grand finale, my little night owls, prepare yourselves for the truly astonishing conclusion to this bizarre tale. You might imagine, quite reasonably, that Henry VIII's terrifying reign of terror, his colossal capacity for chaos, would mercifully conclude with his death, right? Wrong, my dear listeners. Utterly, spectacularly wrong. This man, this monstrous monarch, was so spectacularly committed to being a disaster, so dedicated to causing mayhem, that even his lifeless corpse managed to unleash absolute, unprecedented mayhem. Let's rewind with a shudder to his final, agonizing weeks. Henry had become so monstrously massive, so unbelievably heavy, that he could no longer walk. His once powerful legs, ravaged by disease and obesity, simply could not bear his immense weight. So, his devoted, yet undoubtedly disgusted servants had to laboriously carry him everywhere he wished to go, using a specially designed, perhaps reinforced chair, complete with intricate pulleys and wheels. But here's the truly stomach-churning, utterly disgusting detail. A detail that will make your fur stand on end. His leg wounds, those perpetual festering ulcers, had become so profoundly infected, so utterly putrid, that actual pieces of rotting, decaying flesh would literally detach from his body, falling to the floor as they painstakingly moved him. Servants, poor, long-suffering souls were tasked with the unimaginable indignity of following behind him, clutching cloths and rags to clean up the chunks of decomposing king that regularly dropped onto the palace floors, leaving a grim trail behind him. His death scene itself was like something ripped straight from a macabre horror movie, a nightmare made flesh. Henry's body had swollen to such grotesque, horrifying proportions that his skin was stretched taut, shiny, and almost translucent. The stench, the stench was so overwhelmingly putrid, so utterly unbearable, that even his most experienced doctors, hardened as they were to the gruesome realities of medieval medicine, were forced to flee the room, clutching their stomachs to vomit. When he finally, mercifully, passed from this world, no one, absolutely no one, wanted to get close enough to brave the putrid air to officially confirm he was truly dead. But wait, my little connoisseurs of the grotesque, it gets so much, much worse. Henry's body, even in death, was so incredibly bloated with gases from internal decomposition from the relentless process of decay that his coffin, a massive, custom-built affair, had to be specially reinforced with metal bands and extra wood. They meticulously wrapped his enormous corpse in heavy lead sheets, like a grim metallic shroud, and sealed it within multiple sturdy wooden boxes, firmly believing this elaborate containment would finally, thankfully, contain the mess. They were, to put it mildly, spectacularly incorrect. During the solemn, yet ultimately disastrous funeral procession from London to Windsor Castle, something utterly, unbelievably incredible transpired. A scene worthy of a dark comedy. The coffin, my dear listeners, the massive lead-lined coffin, literally exploded. The gases generated by Henry's decomposing body, building up immense, unstoppable pressure, caused the lead lining to burst open with a sickening sound, and rotting royal remains, liquefied and putrid, splattered all over the interior of the hearse. The resulting stench, a truly indescribable odor, was so utterly horrific, so overwhelming, that the funeral procession was forced to grind to an immediate, chaotic halt, while servants, no doubt gagging and retching, cleaned up the horrifying mess with buckets and rags, desperately trying to contain the overwhelming putrefaction. And here's a final, truly haunting detail that will linger in your mind. A whisper that will send shivers down your spine. Dogs, stray dogs perhaps, or even those following the procession, were reportedly seen licking up the remains of Henry VIII that had leaked from his shattered coffin onto the very road. The man who arrogantly claimed to rule by divine right, who believed himself untouchable, ended up as, well, dog food on a country highway. A truly ignominious end for a king. Even his burial became a monumental, almost comical disaster. They had to dig his grave extra wide, a colossal trench, to accommodate the massive, unwieldy coffin, but the ground repeatedly collapsed because the soil simply couldn't support the immense weight of all that lead and putrefying flesh. It took multiple, frustrating attempts, hours of toil, just to finally get the king's remains into the ground, and, more importantly, to keep them there, secure and undisturbed. And the chaos, the chaos did not end there. For years afterward, people whispered tales of strange noises, chilling moans, and terrible, unidentifiable smells emanating from Henry's tomb. Some, of course, claimed it was his restless ghost, forever tormented, but historians, being the practical, logical cats they are, believe it was likely just more gases, continuously escaping from his continuously, relentlessly decomposing remains, trapped within the stone. And here's a final, chilling, almost unbelievable tidbit your history books conveniently, perhaps mercifully, omit. Henry's death and the subsequent handling of his body was so traumatic, so utterly repulsive for everyone involved that several of the servants who had the misfortune of handling his corpse reportedly died within weeks, quite possibly from virulent infections they contracted from direct contact with his rotting, disease-ridden body. A truly grim legacy indeed. So there you have it, my beloved Golden Chonk listeners. The true, unvarnished, utterly astonishing tale of Henry VIII. Not the charismatic, dashing, vibrant king of popular imagination. Not the figure depicted in romanticized portraits, but a walking, talking, utterly decaying disaster whose own body, his very flesh and blood, betrayed him as dramatically, as profoundly, as he betrayed everyone and everything around him. A man so utterly consumed by paranoia, by fear, by an insatiable gluttony, that he twisted one of Europe's most powerful, most prestigious kingdoms into his own personal, terrifying horror show. The most powerful man in all of England, a monarch of immense power, ultimately became a helpless prisoner of his own decaying, failing body. And even the sweet, final embrace of death couldn't put an end to his astonishing capacity for unleashing absolute, unadulterated chaos, even from beyond the grave. His legacy, my dears, isn't merely the establishment of the Church of England, or the tragic saga of his 6 unfortunate wives. No, his true, chilling legacy is a masterclass, a profound and horrifying lesson in how absolute power, unchecked and unhinged, can corrupt, can twist, can transform a human being into something genuinely monstrous, something utterly unrecognizable. If these disturbing royal facts, these whispers of a forgotten, grotesque past, have made you question everything you thought you knew about history, if they've sent a delightful shiver down your spine, then perhaps you'll consider purring that subscribe button, joining our cozy little circle of historical truth seekers. Because, my dear ones, there are plenty more horrifying truths, more shocking curiosities, more untold stories that those dusty textbooks conveniently, politely leave out. And trust me, my little night owls, you haven't heard anything yet. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with far less volatile, far less odorous, and far less paranoid historical figures. Meow, meow. Bye for now.